Xtalks connects professionals in the life science, medical device, and food industries with useful content like webinars, job openings, articles, and virtual meetings to help you succeed in your career. This food industry-focused podcast brings together some of our editorial staff to share insights into the latest B2B industry news to help keep you up to date.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Xtalks Food Podcast. I'm Sydney Perlmutter, Senior Food Industry Journalist and Webinar Moderator at Xtalks.com, and this week I'm joined by Vera Kovacevic. Thank you all for coming today. So I'm going to start us off with a story. It's a bit of a follow-up to a story that I did sometime last year about the top 10 worst foods for the environment. This is a bit of a more positive spin on that story, and I'm talking about the top 10 best foods for the environment. So these days, eating healthy and having a balanced diet isn't just about getting the right mix of vitamins, minerals, carbs, protein, and fat. And now it's about balancing one's needs with the needs of the planet as well. And one effective way to do this is by focusing on foods that are actually good for the environment. And these foods not only support one's health, but also have minimal impact on the planet. So let's just jump right into it. And each one of these foods, basically it has a low carbon footprint and supports biodiversity and offers substantial nutritional benefits as well. So the first category, I would say, is pulses. So pulses include things like lentils, chickpeas, peas, and beans, which are nutritional powerhouses. Obviously, they're packed with protein, low in fat, and they're rich in soluble fiber. But from an environmental standpoint, pulses are remarkable because they self-fertilize the soil. So their roots contain bacteria that actually convert nitrogen from the air into a form that plants can actually use, reducing the need for artificial fertilizers. And additionally, producing pulses requires a lot less land compared to producing meat, let's say. Second on the list is leafy greens. So dark leafy greens that include spinach, kale, watercress, and broccoli are highly nutritious. They help lower the risk of heart disease and diabetes, and they're rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds. Leafy greens are also very planet-friendly, of course. They grow quickly, allowing for multiple harvests per year, and their production has low carbon emissions. Third on the list, mushrooms. Mushrooms are rich in nutrients like B vitamins and vitamin D, and their texture and flavor, of course, make them excellent meat substitutes. Environmentally, mushrooms are beneficial because they produce less carbon dioxide than many other crops. They also require less water and energy for production, and ongoing research suggests their carbon emissions can be recycled back into greenhouses to grow other crops. Next on the list is locally grown fruits, and that's very important, the locally grown part. So eating locally grown fruits can dramatically reduce one's carbon footprint. Imported fruits often have high water footprints, meaning they use more water compared to those grown locally. So for example, the water footprint of imported raspberries is significantly higher than that of locally grown ones. So by choosing locally sourced fruits and eating them seasonally, consumers can help minimize the environmental impact of transportation and storage. Next is seaweed, which is pretty much gaining a lot of popularity not only as a food ingredient, but also for its environmental benefits. It's rich in protein, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin C, antioxidants, and iodine. Seaweed produces a substantial amount of the Earth's oxygen and can absorb carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and phosphates, effectively converting agricultural runoff. And it can also be harvested multiple times a year, making it one of the best foods for the environment. Okay, so I'm halfway through the list. So Vera, are there any surprises here or any ones that, you're like, this makes total sense?
Yeah, a couple of surprises. Mushrooms. So
okay.
I never thought of them.
Yeah.
Just because maybe not, it's not like a daily type of food item. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, seaweed as well is very surprising to me. But I did learn about the beneficial effects of seaweeds in one of your previous articles. And then I also watched a movie, forget what it was called, but one of the actors in the movie did harvested seaweed for a living, and then he talked about how beneficial it is.
Okay, so you knew that one already.
Yeah, but I'm surprised about mushrooms. So the main rationale for mushrooms was that they can they don't produce a lot of CO2, or?
Yeah, they produce less than other crops, right? And then they also require less water and energy for production. And then some research was suggesting that their carbon emissions can be recycled back into greenhouses to grow other crops.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so mushrooms and seaweed. Those guys kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Wasn't expecting those. But the first one on the list, like the peanuts and the...
Oh, yes, pulses. So
Pulses.
lentils, chickpeas, peas, beans, basically all
not
like...
peanuts, sorry.
No, not peanuts. Actually, don't know how good peanuts are for the environment.
Okay, fair enough.
Pulses, yeah. I've never heard of them in that category before, but it's a lot of, alternative protein.
Or like plant-based.
Plant-based protein,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And I guess mushrooms as well. You'll notice, obviously, on the list, we haven't said any meat items yet. But number 6, actually, which I'm going to get to, there are actually some more surprises for me on the latter half of the list. So I'll continue and ask that question again. So number 6 is mussels. So mussels and other things like clams as well are nutrient-dense foods, and they have high levels of protein, omega-3s, iron, zinc, and magnesium. And they're excellent for feeding a growing population, but they can also help clean oceans by filtering water and removing waste particles. Farmed mussels do not require land, fresh water, or feed, and their farming ropes provide habitats for other marine life. 7 on the list, cereals and grains. So they make up a large part of a healthy diet. However, it's important to diversify the types of grains that one consumes. Monoculture farming can harm soil and increase the need for pesticides. So opt for grains like buckwheat, teff, spelt, and quinoa. And these alternatives not only enrich one's diet, but also support better soil health and reduce the need for chemical inputs. 8, very surprising one, is grass-fed beef. So grass-fed beef may seem like an unlikely candidate for sustainable food, but it has its merits. Some land used for grazing cattle is unsuitable for growing crops, and if managed as part of a regenerative farm, grazing cattle can help improve soil health. So grass-fed beef can be carbon neutral in the long term, although it's not a complete solution to climate change. But for those who consume meat, locally sourced grass-fed beef is the least impactful option. 9, oats, which are a very resilient crop that grow at high altitudes and without chemical fertilizers. And they can be used as a break crop to replenish soil health. Oat milk is a more effective, water-efficient plant milk in comparison to soy or rice milk. Nutritionally, oats help lower bad cholesterol and reduce high blood pressure. Locally grown oats are preferable to minimize the environmental impact of transportation. And then last on the list, good old figs. So figs are not only delicious, but also environmentally beneficial. They support a vast array of wildlife, with many bird and mammal species also depending on them. Figs can help regenerate deforested landscapes and are resilient to climate change. For humans, figs support digestion, weight management, bone health, and blood pressure regulation. And they grow well in many Mediterranean climates and can even be cultivated in home gardens as well. So yeah, after this latter half of the list, any surprises for you?
The mussels. That was a surprise for me. And it was grass-fed beef.
Mm-hmm.
So what is beef usually fed with? I thought.
Okay, so yeah, the difference between grass-fed beef and beef that doesn't say grass-fed is that they the dairy cattle, or sorry, the cattle or cows will be fed with like a feed. Whereas grass-fed beef, they're just eating grass and like more, natural foods, right? They're not being no hormones or anything added. So there's also, like, in addition to grass-fed beef, there's also like grass-fed butter you'll see.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's just cattle that same thing, but their milk is turned into butter. And often you'll find, because my dad actually always buys grass-fed beef and butter and things like that, because he believes that it's better for him, not necessarily for the environment. Okay. But it's often more expensive, right? And you can imagine why. Actually, that's what I was going to bring up too, is that a lot of, these items, aside from the pulses category and maybe like the mushrooms and seaweed and maybe cereal, okay, so maybe half of the items on this list might be a little bit more expensive. So we're talking like locally grown fruits, they're going to be more expensive for sure, right? The grass-fed beef is going to be a bit more expensive, just simply because it takes a little bit more time sometimes. But I think what we're seeing is that consumers are often willing to pay a little bit more for these like healthier for you and healthier for the environment foods.
Yeah, I think so too. Were there any on the list that surprised you?
I would say also mussels. Yeah, I also didn't know that mussels can help like clean the ocean like by filtering water. And I was a little bit surprised, and maybe you know more about this than I do, but that mussels, you know, there wouldn't be an issue with any like like what's in fish?
Oh, like those organic or just in general contaminant accumulation.
Yeah. Maybe they're less prone to that. But also, I think in this list specifically, we're talking about farmed mussels. So I guess it's in a more controlled environment. But they're still in open water, I think. So maybe what is that? There's one chemical that fish often have in it and people are scared of.
Oh, the mercury, the metal?
Yes, mercury, yes.
Yeah.
So do you know if they're less, you know, likely to be to absorb it in the water?
Well, definitely like a lot of environmental chemistry studies have evaluated like the uptake of contaminants in mushrooms. So
mushrooms or mussels?
Sorry, mussels.
We're talking about mushrooms.
Sorry, I meant mussels. So they are kind of like a model organism in a way for a lot of environmental studies. And it's because of that reason, because they filter water, right? So whether it's as big of a concern as mercury in fish, like I don't think so. I think more emphasis has been made on like mercury in fish. But it is definitely like a model aquatic organism for that reason, used in many, many studies.
Interesting.
But also I was thinking, why are they good for the environment for like the farmed mushrooms? Sorry, farmed mussels.
That's because they're ropes that are surrounding them in the water also provide habitats for other marine life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Really, really
Which
cool.
is interesting. Yeah. For me, I mean, you'd have to get over the mental element of eating mussels. I've never had a mussel. I'm too scared to eat them.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
But in terms of all the other foods on this list, I'm not a huge fan of pulses, to be honest with you, but leafy greens, mushrooms, fruits, cereals, grass-fed beef, oats, figs. I love those. I love those foods. Yeah.
I definitely think more than half of them can be part of a regular diet.
100%. Yeah. And this list is obviously like, you know, just for people's information. It's not like you need to eat these things, cut out everything else.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But in contrast, I remember, you know, when we were talking about the top 10 worst foods for the environment, just to remind everyone, we had foods like beef, obviously, beef as in the meat. We had dark chocolate, lamb and mutton, beef for dairy, coffee, farmed shrimp, cheese, farmed fish, pork, and poultry. So we had basically like all meats except for a few on the worst foods, and then, you know, all like mostly plant-based items on this list, which does make sense. Yeah. But I do also, you know, like to include the beef and the mussels as well to show that not all, you know, animal-based protein is bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to our next story, the FDA is actually preparing to introduce a new requirement for prepackaged foods in the U.S. The new rule would mandate that front-of-package nutrition labeling, which would display key nutrient information on the front of the packaging, be in addition to the existing nutrition label on the back. So the idea of front-of-package nutrition labeling is not new, actually, since many countries already use this system. So for instance, in Chile, a stop sign symbol warns consumers if a product is high in sugar, saturated fat, sodium, or calories. And Israel uses a red warning label for similar purposes, while Singapore assigns a letter grade to beverages based on their nutritional value. So now in the U.S., advocates have long lobbied for the FDA for front-of-package labels, claiming that they help consumers make healthier choices and encourage food manufacturers to reformulate their products. So the FDA, which had been largely silent on this issue, expressed interest in front of package labeling as part of the National Health Strategy announced at the White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health back in 2002. But since then, the FDA has reviewed relevant literature and conducted some focus groups to test potential label designs. So the proposal, of course, faces some opposition from trade associations representing the food and beverage industry. So the Consumer Brands Association and the Food Industry Association, or FMI, created the voluntary Facts Up Front label system in 2011. So this system highlights calories, saturated fat, sodium, and added sugar per serving on the front of packages. So these organizations argue that mandatory interpretive front of package nutrition labeling designs could cause unnecessary fear among consumers without providing more meaningful context on how a food item fits into a healthy diet. And there's also potential legal challenges as well. So the U.S. has broad interpretations of free speech, of course, including corporate speech. So this means that purely factual labels, such as those indicating grams of added sugar, are more likely to be deemed constitutional compared to labels using colors or shapes to characterize a product's healthiness. So can you sort of picture what these would look like? We obviously already know what the nutrition label on foods looks like, but now there will be a lot of key nutrient info on the front of the package. How deeply do you think this will affect packaging? Oftentimes there's already a lot of text and space already taken up on packaging. So can you picture this even?
I can. I think it could be a fairly small label, kind of I don't know, like a recycling label you would see on some food items. So it doesn't have to be that big. It could be various colors. I like the orange, red, and green coloring system. I think it would be a lot of work for all food companies to incorporate this. So right now, the idea is still in the works, right? There's no due date for this. They actually are seeking industry comments.
Well, what the agency is actually targeting to release the proposal for this, the official proposal, sometime this summer. So yeah, it's not a done deal yet. Yeah. It's not a done deal, but I'm kind of wondering, when people are selecting new foods or are curious about the nutritional info, I always thought that the, label at the back was pretty sufficient, especially because it also mentions the percentage of, daily intake that a certain nutritional value has. Do you agree? Do you think that's enough, or do you think that there is more needed?
I think there is more needed because I think many consumers don't look at the back of the package when they buy items. I think they just look at the front. Is it visually appealing? Does the food or drink look visually appealing to them? So I don't think many people read the nutritional label at the back unless they are on some, very specific diet or something. Yeah. I think the average consumer doesn't check. I think it would be highly useful for this kind of labeling, front of packaging labeling system to be in place, just because I don't think the back of the packaging is very obvious towards things like added sugars or high in sugar or high in fat or high in sodium. So they give you a percentage, but you're just I'm just going to have a fraction of this and it's fine, but you probably end up having the whole thing. And then there's a issue there. I think if there was more clear and evident labeling, not just about bad bad for you, but also good for you. What's the good and what's the bad? Let's be fair here, right? And then consumers can see if something is high in a macro nutrient or whatever that they want to avoid, then they can just eat less of it, and it would be more beneficial for society as a whole. But I think the food industry is going to really rally up against this. Especially snack producers. They're just going to have warning labels on the front of the packaging. Do you think their sales would improve with that? Definitely not. I don't think so. It could only go down, right?
It's like when they had to add, pictures of what could happen to you if you smoke cigarettes on the cigarette, cartons.
Good analogy. I don't know if that did anything.
Oh, no, yeah. You probably didn't.
To people who are addicted to, smoking.
But, people are addicted to food as well. So
true.
I wonder what the impact will be.
I think consumers may be a little bit more intimidated or a little scared or worried if they see those labels. I don't think this is going to benefit the snack food industry at all. I think this is only going to benefit like better for you food snacks, kind of, or like functional beverages. That's why I think I expect the snack industry, like Mars and what else, Nestle,
Mondelez,
all those chocolate producers and chips and Lay's and all the like, I expect them to be really against this.
Yes, I agree. And I do agree with your point that maybe, it isn't enough, the nutritional info on the back, because you're right. I mean, everything is written in the exact same font. There's no difference in colors. You really have to read it thoroughly to get a good idea. So I'll speak for myself there, because I typically look, but and sometimes it actually has stopped me from buying things before, especially beverages, because I'll look at how high in sugar some of them are. And I'm like, oh, I don't need that. I do not need that much sugar. I thought this was just orange juice. No, it's mostly sugar.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I purposely don't look because I don't want to know.
Ignorance is bliss,
Yeah.
So, of course, on the other side of the, of everything, advocates for the mandatory front of package nutrition labeling argue that the voluntary system right now is not sufficient. So they believe that only mandatory widespread labeling system can provide consumers with reliable and consistent nutritional info. And they criticize the facts up front, that program I was mentioning, for lacking context, advocating for more explicit labels such as indicating if a product is high in certain nutrients. So advocates point to data from countries like Chile, where front of package labeling has led to healthier consumer choices and product reformulations. And they argue that the food industry's resistance is a typical anti-regulatory tactic to delay beneficial policies. So in terms of the FDA's findings, it reviewed scientific literature and concluded that front of package labels can help consumers identify healthy foods, particularly for those with lower nutrition knowledge or limited time. So the FDA tested various label designs, including traffic light colors indicating high, red, medium, yellow, or low green levels of saturated fat, sodium, or added sugars. And some labels stated if a product was high in these nutrients, sometimes including the percentage of the recommended daily value. So the discussion around front of package labeling is timely, as obesity rates in the U.S. have risen to affect about 42% of adults. And more than 1 million Americans die annually from diet-related diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. And like I mentioned, the agency is targeting a proposal release for this summer. So we should be seeing this sometime soon. And yeah, I'll be very curious to see if this actually does, come to fruition, how different our food might look, or if it will. If it won't. You're right. It can be very small, but I'm sure there's going to be sizing regulations for it.
Yes.
It's not just going to be like tiny skip that you have to squint in order to see it.
Yeah. I agree. But for the 3 example countries that you mentioned, which system did you like the best and why? Like the traffic lights, the letter grade, and what was the other one?
And then the other one in Singapore, I believe, that's the letter grade. And then Israel uses a red warning label, like for similar purposes, if things are high in, like sugar, saturated fat, and same thing with Chile, which is like a stop sign. And I have to agree. I think that, I actually wouldn't really choose any of these. I like the traffic light colors to indicate things, because you want to see, I guess, the bad, but you also want to see the good. And you want to see, I guess, the medium as well.
Yeah.
You want to see everything. If you're just getting the bad, it's like, oh no, that's not good. You want to see the good as well. You want to see what things are high in, the positive nutrients.
Yes.
So I actually do like this system, and I don't know. I don't think that it will scare people away. I think like the FDA said, it'll help people who are just not as informed, on nutritional and don't have as much time to literally read all of the nutritional info on the back, because that can take some time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it will help food companies reformulate their products, which is the ultimate goal, right? And they should, really. I mean, maybe they can reformulate it so they have like a green light for all of those things. And also, we're not trying to say that like fat or sodium or what was the other one? Glucose, sugar, that's okay. Those are needed in every diet. Yes. Now, some people have to have less of them than others, right? Because of certain health conditions. But those are a part of a regular and healthy diet and certainly needed. And I think it's not impossible to reformulate a lot of food products so that they have healthy amounts of each of those things. What do you think?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think you can, we're seeing so many alternatives as well come to light these days, like, sugar replacements and sweeteners rather. It's in this day and age, I think it's easier than ever to sort of reformulate products that maybe only have a minor impact on the flavor, texture. Like, I think we definitely have the technology to reformulate a lot of things. Is it going to be cheap? No. Is it going to be easy? Maybe, maybe not. Depends how much money companies have at play here. But I think for the long term, if this does become a thing, and if companies don't want to lose sales, they're gonna have to do some reformulating or come out with alternative products, maybe in addition to existing products, right? Yeah. And we see that a lot, or there was a phase a little while ago where companies, specifically like chocolate producers, were coming out with plant-based versions of the classic chocolate bars.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So instead of replacing them entirely, they just added a new product. And maybe we'll see this. Maybe we'll see lower in sugar products, lower in calorie products, to complement, existing products. Because, I don't think, like you said, we don't want to get rid of, any of these foods. And everything is okay in moderation. But I think in addition to existing products, some healthier, better for you. Yes. That is the trend these days. And I think this is definitely a big part of it. And it kind of also is reminding me a little bit of what's going on in the allergy space right now with labeling and how the FDA is very focused on making sure that allergens are very properly labeled and whatnot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would say that's a little bit more like pressing of an issue, especially when it comes to not being sued. You want to make sure that your allergens are very well stated. But the FDA has a huge role to play in all sorts of labeling, and it's definitely been an ongoing, journey for the FDA to sort of determine what's the right move here. So I guess in the summertime when we do get this proposal, we'll see all the details and see if they went with this traffic light system.
That'd be cool to see.
All right, well, that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Food Podcast. If you like today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks, everyone, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Xtalks Food Industry Podcast. If you enjoyed our discussions today, please share the episode with your friends and colleagues, and be sure to subscribe in order to be notified when a new episode is released. To join in on the discussion, you can find Xtalks on social media. Email podcast@xtalks.com or comment on the articles directly. Links are in the show description. Take a moment to join our community at xtalks.com to get access to everything we have to offer, including webinars, job listings, virtual meetings, articles, and more. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers sharing them. They should not be taken as professional advice and do not necessarily reflect the policy or position Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.